Well, for me, bringing nature into the classroom and then subsequently taking students outdoors was just a really natural fit. In my childhood growing up, nature was such a part of our daily lives that it really just kind of permeates who I am as a person. And so, when you start teaching, I know that for me, I probably wasn't as effective in early years as I became later. And so, early on, you get some of these glazed looks, and the kids, sometimes you're doing some things that you have to do, and maybe they're not, it's not their cup of tea. They don't want to sit at the desk and write all day. But then you can see those same students come to life when you either take them outdoors and look at trees or flowers, or maybe bring a flower or an insect into the classroom, and they just come to life. And it gives them, it just opens a whole new world for kids who maybe didn't have the same type of upbringing that I did, where nature was such a part of their lives. My son, who's a young man now, but when he was a little boy, he liked to collect rocks and feathers and snake skins, anything he could find outside, and he would give them to me. And the first few times he gave me something, I didn't realize how significant it was to him, so I would just maybe toss it aside, and then later he would come back and ask me if he could have it. And so I would frantically search for either that particular feather or one that looked like it. So one Monday morning, I'd spent a lot of time outdoors with my son on the weekend. We had all these collections of rocks and feathers and snake skins, but I really didn't spend much time on lesson plans. So on the way out the door, I grabbed his little plastic box of animal artifacts, we called it, and took it to the classroom. And in addition to teaching science, all teachers in that school were teaching writing, and we had a big writing test coming up. So I asked the students to each take one of my son's animal artifacts. So they got either a feather or maybe a bird's eggshell. Somebody got like a shark's tooth or something that we had in there. So they all got a different item, and then they wrote a paragraph or a story starter about this item. And those were some of the most interesting writing samples that I had collected as a teacher to that point. And so I realized that just bringing something really simple into the classroom could elicit spectacular work for my students. And so I thought, all right, this was kind of accidental learning that I did as a teacher. So I need to do more of this and make it better, and then let the kids find their own artifacts. So from that, we ended up going outside, and then it just kind of exploded into outdoor classrooms and lots of lessons outdoors and lots of indoor lessons related to the outdoors. Well, I think the most important consideration in these types of lessons is going to be safety, and it's really I'm really thankful as an author for NSTA Press that NSTA has a great kind of safety check mechanism for us, in an expert reviewer and then lots of good editors. But for a teacher in the classroom, bringing something in from the outdoors, they need to think about their students and what allergies they might have. They need to think about what season of the year it is. If it's a season where there's a lot of pollen in the air and they already have students with multiple allergies, and they hear a lot of sniffles in the classroom, maybe they need to look at pictures of a flower rather than bringing a flower in that day. So there are safety/health considerations that they should think about, and then that could present an obstacle or it could prevent one. So if you end up bringing something in that causes a problem for students and you end up with a lot of students in the school office or clinic, then you might get some feedback. Maybe you shouldn't take your kids outside, or maybe you shouldn't bring these things in. So if you prepare and you kind of know your students, look at their records, that might prevent some of those things from coming up. I think too, I mentioned administrators. You really want to, as you're teaching science, you want the full support of administrators, whether you're bringing outdoor items or animals or plants into the classroom. You want to make sure they're aware of it. And then also, if you're taking kids outdoors, you want to talk to your building administrator about what part of the schoolyard you're going into. Is that the best part for it? So you want to just make sure that you kind of have approval for where you're going and give them a sense of what you're going to do when you get there. And I think being well prepared will take care of a lot of those problems. If I was a classroom teacher and I walked up to my principal and I say, Ms. Smith, I'm going to go outside and I want to teach my students on state standard A1 from the third grade frameworks, and I want to show them how butterflies are flying around pollinating flowers, and we're going to incorporate some math and then come back in and graph what we saw. As opposed to saying, hey, Ms. Smith, can I just take my class outside for half an hour this afternoon? I think I'm going to get a completely different response on those two things. And it wouldn't hurt to even have something in writing that you can hand to them, or either email your principal, so that they get an idea of what you're going to be doing and they see the educational value. We're not going out for recess, we're going outside to learn. My friends who wrote the picture perfect science books often call me the outdoor science guy. And so they were surprised to learn that I was also into all this technology, because they think of me, you know, like in khakis and in a t-shirt digging in the earth, but they don't. What they didn't know is that at the same time I'm digging, I have my smartphone and I'm videoing, you know, to see the first earthworm in the ground. And there's so much technology that teachers can use right now, and it's so exciting. I mentioned the smartphone, and just this week I learned about an app that apparently I'm the last to know about, called Tree Snap, so that students can use a smartphone to snap a picture of a leaf on a tree. And not only does it identify the species of the tree, it gives the coordinates and reports that to a mapping system. So teachers and students all over the country are reporting trees that contribute to this map. So if I'm teaching in one place and I'm reporting maybe all the poplar trees there, then I can see them somewhere else, or what species they have, which I think is a great app, and it's a free one. So I really encourage teachers to look for those resources, because they're being developed constantly. And then in addition, a lot of the NSTA partners, some of the vendor partners that make hardware for outdoor use, well, outdoor or indoor. But for instance, in Outdoor Science Practical Guide, there's a lesson on compost. And in that one, we suggest that for upper elementary or middle school students, that they use a probe and maybe a graphing calculator or some other handheld device, so that they're taking the temperature inside the compost bin or compost pile. And then in bringing in outdoor science in, we've got kind of a smaller indoor composting lesson. And with that one, you could do the same thing. You could use a regular thermometer, and then you might even use, if you had a temperature app on a smartphone, and then maybe a probe with a graphing calculator, and compare the three. Well, you know, it's so hard for me to think about kids who really don't have this love and zeal for going outdoors or being outdoors. But it's a big plus for me when I'm working with students and teachers to show somebody something new that they haven't noticed outdoors. And I think for students, one of the best things is that we're getting them up and moving. We're getting them, you know, they're not using a pen and paper or pencil and paper and just sitting and writing. They're not filling out a worksheet. They're going to get up and go do something. They're going to discover science, do something with what they discover, conduct an experiment or an exploration, and then they're going to write about it. So, you know, we know that all scientists have to read, we know that they have to write, and they even have to sometimes just use very simple technology like word processing. But before they do that, maybe before, during, and after, they need to be doing some type of field work where they're looking at bugs, or they're observing birds flying around the schoolyard. But it not only does it do that for them, but if we think about the different kinds of learners that we have, particularly kids who are kinesthetic learners that need to be moving in order to learn effectively, I've seen enormous gains with kids who are really struggling in a traditional classroom setting when they have the opportunity to either just take a walk through the schoolyard, or if there is an outdoor classroom, to go outdoors and use that. And my real mission in writing books about outdoor science is to give teachers some tools and some ways that they can incorporate this to help their students, and just to share what I've discovered and what's been successful that I'm aware of. And I'm constantly learning from the teachers who are using the lessons, and frequently get emails with suggestions. So it's a good partnership that we have, not only with as NSTA Press authors, but with the teachers that we get to talk to.